Guys, today's episode was nothing short of triggering in the best way. And you all know that your triggers are your doorways to growth. So when you feel triggered about today's episode, when you think, I don't agree, that's fine. You're allowed to not agree. But what my encouragement is for you to open up a space with yourself for reflection. For myself, there's reflection in everything that Kelly shared today. Kelly Brogan, she is an MD. She is a renowned psychiatrist. She is a New York Times bestselling author, a top podcast host. She is the creator of the Feminine Reclamation Program, Reclaimed, which is an online healing program, also Vital Mind Reset. And Kelly today is an absolute wealth of knowledge. I was recently on her podcast. We talked a lot about being the feminine female breadwinner. So you can go and listen to that if you want to. We'll link it down below. Today, we talked about everything from feminism to motherhood to creating children that are self-motivated. They're intrinsically motivated. We talked about whether medication is being overprescribed, whether it's kind of taking a Band-Aid approach. I mean, we talked about the shit that ruffles feathers is what we talked about. So if you want to ruffle some of your own feathers, if you want to open up your mind to really seeing yourself, seeing the paradigm that you're potentially playing in a different way, you need to listen to this episode. This episode is going to force you to look at your shadows. It's going to I encourage you to see this episode as an invitation to your own growth. Of course, you are going to take what resonates. You are going to leave what doesn't resonate. This isn't about someone is right or wrong. Take Kelly's experience, her anecdotal evidence, her own journey, and her truths as a invitation to look deeper into your way of living, your way of seeing feminine, masculine, motherhood, prescription medication, all the things. It truly was incredible. I cannot wait for you guys to dive in. As usual, please leave a review if you haven't already. Share the episode with a friend, share it on Instagram stories, and tag Kelly and myself. All of her links are down below. Let's dive in. All right, Kelly, I'm so excited for you to just like pop off about all the things. We share so much in common in terms of a lot of how we see the world, especially feminism, the feminine and masculine and all of that. But you bring such a grounded, I don't even know how to describe it, but the way that you talk is so eloquent. You are so grounded in the things that you talk about. You've obviously had like so many experiences of your own. You're a mom of 2 daughters, just a wealth of knowledge. So thank you for being here. And I'm so excited to get into everything.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here with you.
So my first question that I really, really want to ask you is just about motherhood. When we were talking on my podcast, when I was on your podcast, you kind of were planting the seed about this. And I was like, okay, we'll save it for when you're on mine. But I would love for you to just share with the audience something that you've talked about before with motherhood. And it's this idea that all a child owes their mother is the gratitude of life. And many parents, especially these days, the whole narrative around motherhood being like you lose your life and it's the hardest thing in the world and blah, blah, blah. Many parents put themselves kind of almost in this victim situation as though they're a victim of their child and their child then owes them something. And, I'm sure you've seen this so much in your practice, and I've seen it so much with my clients of like this feeling of obligation to their parents. And in my perspective, it's emotional immaturity from the parents, and it creates children and then adults that feel like they have an obligation, apart, to their parents, apart from the gratitude of life towards their parents. So can you just pop off on this one? Because I love the way that you talk about this.
Yeah. So I'll start by just inviting everybody listening to consider what it might have felt like if you heard from your parents, after all I've done for you, right? Or
that is such a common line. Yeah.
It's such a common line. These tropes, these parental tropes are so penetrant. And most of us have been exposed to the reflexive dogma of emotionally immature parenting, right? And you referenced a kind of emotional incest that can happen where you are regulating yourself emotionally through your kids. And it's so normalized that we think of it as just being how you discipline, right? How you set boundaries. And there were a couple of touch points that began to open me up, because what you're referencing, the arc of my mothering, has probably been the most humbling mm, experience of my life. I mean,
Yeah.
truly, the humility that I uh, enjoy, I would say, actually,
Yeah.
at this stage with my daughters both being teenagers, is something that I had to grow, I would say, on a nervous system level, the capacity to hold, because there are manager parts and protector parts that insist that I am right and that they need
Mm.
my perspective, right? Still to this day. So a couple of touch points are that really influenced me and inspired me to consider this perspective, that our children owe us nothing, not respect, not chores, not any sort of appreciation or gratitude, uh, is family constellation. So you reference this notion that there's a gratitude, a thankfulness for life. And in family constellation, which I am pretty much ask anybody like a total zealot about this modality, because it's changed my life, and
It's
specifically,
have you I'm assuming you've done it right in person
oh
where
yes,
you
yes, dozens
okay,
and
it
dozens.
is the most wild thing. I was doing a sorry, not to like go on a tangent,
No,
but people
I knew
need to
you knew about
understand
it.
how like how incredible this is. I was
I know.
last year we were doing a retreat for my certification students and my husband is like not into this stuff, right? So we were like, let's do one for him, right? And let's just see. He and of course these women know nothing about his life or anything. Like he's not in the container with them. He was like goosebumps, jaw dropped
Yeah.
of what was coming through. Like it just, oh my God, it's the most incredible thing. Sorry, keep going.
I
Anyone that
know.
hasn't
I mean,
experienced
right?
it in person, it is so magical. It really shows you like the law of oneness and the power of energy, but also just like how like the constellation of the family, the blueprint of the family, the energy of the family is pertinent in the energy around you that other people can actually pick up on.
I love how you explained it, because I have struggled for years
Mm.
to convey this. I mean, in my last book, I really tried, and I still feel like
It
I
is hard.
often,
It is
it's
hard.
so
You
hard
have
to
to
explain.
experience it.
You have to experience it. And
Yeah.
I'll often point to, there's a Netflix special called Another Self, which actually I think is in its second season. It's a Turkish show. And I think it does a pretty good job
Oh,
of
I need to watch that. I haven't watched
depicting
that.
it. Yeah, it's good. It's a good show. The first
Okay.
season is better.
Okay.
But regardless, there are a couple of tenets, and they call them laws, in family constellation. And one of them is that the direction of life moves down the generations. There are several. There's hierarchy. There's belonging, uh, give and take. All of these very orienting, rational, logical premises upon which we can base our dynamics in our family structure, but also in anyone who is of relevance. So if you were, let's say, violated by a stranger, let's say like a neighbor or something, that person is a part of your system. If you had a
Yeah.
miscarriage or an abortion, that is a part of that child, if you want to call it that, is a part of your system forever. And so to get right, to organize, to systematize is a part of what this modality offers. However, if the direction of life moves down the generations, then that means it doesn't make sense for the giving to go backward, right? Other than
Yeah.
the gift of life, right? So when you utter healing phrases, they're called in family constellation, you'll say something like, I thank you for giving me life, right? Or you'll name your parents specifically and say, thank you for giving me life. So, I remember one one cardinal experience that I had with one of my daughters, my younger daughter. It was, I don't know, probably 2 years ago or something. And I've been a very like, oh, don't worry about me, kind of birthday girl, where I'm like, oh, you don't have to get me anything. And I've not been good at receiving is really the root of
Mm.
that.
Right.
But regardless, I would always say like, plus I don't really value my kids like buying me stuff. However, I've been a words of affirmation girly forever, and
Mm.
so
Yep.
cards and whatever are very valuable to me. Anyway, my birthday comes and goes, and at this particular year, I didn't get a card.
Oh,
Or
I remember the first time Hal didn't give me a card, my husband, and he didn't quite know the importance of a card. We were early dating. It was not a good day for him.
right. Right? And
Yeah.
I I pulled on this wisdom and
Mm,
I anchored my heart in this place when my inner girl was like, you said you were giving me a card and you didn't give me a card, and where is it? And now my birthday was 3 days
yeah.
ago and it didn't happen yet. And I remembered actually giving me something, which is, I know many of us relate to giving our parents stuff all the freaking time, right? Like
Yeah.
valuable things and assistance and aid and all this stuff. And it's venerated in a lot of other cultures, of course, traditionally, the world over. Regardless, this is my ethos. And I remembered in that moment, actually, she owes me nothing. No cards, no gifts,
Yeah.
no acknowledgement of anything. And if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Of course, that's the beginning of non attachment, right?
Right. Right.
And so that's been extraordinarily orienting to me and liberating, so that there isn't a performative layer of transaction, because a lot of what you reference in your question is transactional love, right? So the giving to get of codependent dynamics, which define so many of our upbringings. Another touch
And
point,
also even people pleasing, I'm sure, Kelly,
of
right?
course,
Of
it's
yeah, of that
part and
obligation
parcel.
of fear. If they don't give something to their parents, they're going to get in trouble. Even if, you're listening and you're a 32-year-old woman, there could still be that undercurrent of fear if I don't do X, Y, and Z for my mom or my dad.
Exactly. And you're bringing me to my second. I probably have three. My second touch point, which is around Alfie Kohn's work. So he wrote a book
Okay.
called Unconditional Parenting, I believe.
Yes, I
And
bought it thanks to you. You told me about
okay,
it.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of all you need to know, in my
Right.
opinion, about parenting. And I've read tons of books, and it was probably the most seminal. And one of the examples that he gives is when you reward. So he talks about reward and punishment, and basically the perils of both, right? So praise also, not just punishment, not just timeouts and, let alone obviously like, physical abuse and the whole spectrum. But he talks about this example of if a little girl is giving her little classmate friend a blueberry because she wants to. And the mom praises that, right? And the mom says, "Oh, that's so nice of you to give that blueberry to Billy." You know, all of a sudden, her experience of giving, which is a natural human expression of connection, right? Her experience of giving is now extrinsically motivated so that she can secure her mother's, the ultimate, source of validation and approval, her mother's love,
Right.
right? So how do you get around that? Right? You talk about what happened, not how you feel about what she did. Right? You
Mm,
gave that blueberry to Billy. That's all, just mirroring, right? So it sort of can be really reduced to some simple things to remember when you're parenting. It's just
right.
mirroring and empathy and being a witness is so much more powerful and less deranging to this extrinsic people pleasing impulse that we develop when we learn to give for our own safety rather than for the pleasure of giving. And I would say the last touch point, obviously I can yap about this subject so much, is a
I
Byron
love it.
Katie statement, that I'll never forget. I love Byron Katie's work. And she talks about how, with regard to, and it was just sort of like a brief mention, I think in one of her books, and it just stayed with me forever. And she talks about how if you are a mom, let's say you're a parent, and your kid's socks are on the floor, right? You might feel all sorts of things. Why don't they clean up? I have to do fucking everything in this house. They're so inconsiderate. They always leave a mess. Is it so much to ask them to clean their damn room?
Mm,
And she says, if you want the sock picked up, pick up the sock.
profound. So
Right.
I'm curious, like with all of this, right? And we could, I really want to touch on the feminism piece as well. So for the listeners, even if you're not a mom listening to this, but you want to be a mom, listen. Otherwise, you can fast forward because I'm going to get into some other juicy stuff. But whilst we're on this, I want to then talk about like gentle parenting and your perspective of gentle parenting and how the kind of like cultural landscape right now of gentle parenting in the extreme form, well, in my opinion, I think it's detrimental. It does not provide structure, boundaries, direction, or like true safety to a child. But then, even with like the sock example, where is that then line, that dance between, because you talk about, you know, you have raised your girls to be like good humans. So where is that line then between raising children that understand boundaries and doing nice things for other people and blah 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 versus raising children that feel obligated to perform in a certain way to get their parents' love?
It's such a good question. And I can only speak obviously from my experience. I'm not, some sort of parenting pedagogue or anything. However, I can give a salient example, which is again around how do you set the conditions for intrinsic motivation to learn,
Mm,
right? To give, to connect, to caretake the environment that you live in, all these things. Uh, First of all, it always comes down to you as a mom. That relationship is the most important, in my opinion, relational template that a human will experience in their life, right? So you're the mom, you're the only mom, and you matter so much, right? And no matter how much they're tantruming or saying, I hate you, or whatever it is, the longing for intimacy in that dynamic is bilateral, right? Like it's
mm,
bidirectional. So when you remember that, then you recognize the power that you have to be the energy that you want to receive, right? That you want to experience, that you want to be surrounded by. So, how you care for yourself, how you offer compassion, how do you relate to an invitation that you don't actually want to oblige? Do you say yes just because it's nice, right? And so, of course, it's always going to come back to focusing on your own emotional and relational maturation. Okay. That being said, I do not, right, because when my girls were like tweens, I wrote a book called Own Yourself. This is like my second book or whatever, and they leverage that early on, right?
okay.
Because they would talk to me about what I was teaching them, which is like that you need to own yourself, you need to take responsibility for your decisions. You never should do anything that you don't want to do intrinsically. And I would talk to them about the illusion of altruism and philanthropy and how nobody ever actually does anything for somebody else. You're always doing it for the hit, right? You're always doing it for what it feels like to give, right?
Right.
Volunteer every single week. I could certainly tell myself I am a good woman and I'm a good person for serving. I do it because I feel good when I do it. In the privacy of my own experience, I get a hit, is one way to put it. Okay.
Yeah.
So they learned this early on. And I remember for example, I planned a trip to go see a girlfriend of mine a couple hours away, and I was going to bring my daughters. And she has a daughter, and they're not really like super friendly or whatever. So
Okay.
one of my daughters at the last minute was like, I don't want to go. Okay. Now, one option would have been to convince her that she does want to go. That's called
Mm,
gaslighting. Okay.
right.
Um, and the nuance is, can you feel into your child's actual yes or no? Right? Like if you know your child loves swimming,
Yeah.
and one day they say, I don't want to go. But you know that yes is there. Nurturing that yes, creating a container like a glass around the little flicker of flame of that yes is something that you have a unique capacity to do as a parent, right? So
Right.
how do you get them back in touch with and out of the resistance, right? But if that little no is something you feel in your body is there, then honoring it sometimes is really inconvenient. Right?
Mm,
So I felt that little no, and not only did I feel that, I felt that she was right, that I had sort of like misdesigned this trip.
right.
It was kind
Right.
of like a bad idea. Like I wanted to go see my girlfriend, but I was like dragging my kids along. What the fuck are they going to
Yeah.
do? They don't want to
Yeah.
hang out with their daughter. Like it was sort of like a bad idea. I was trying to jam different concepts together.
Yeah.
And so we canceled it. And you know what? Everyone was fine. It was fine.
Yeah.
And another example is that, I co-parent, obviously, and
Mhm.
or not obviously, but I do. And with half custody, and their dad lives like 10 minutes away from me. And I think we co-parent very well. However, he has a different vibe in his household, right? And he's remarried, et cetera. And they have a lot of rules about, from my understanding, about cleaning their room. Okay, so like the room has to be clean and people are watching and commenting and sort of like maybe nagging or whatever.
Yep.
And I have zero rules. Okay, when 2020 hit, I did a lot of deep inner examination of how I might have been holding the same totalitarian, authoritarian energy that I was pointing a finger at as an activist on the outside, right? And I found a couple places to clean up, right? One was how I related to my children's eating. Okay, so I was like a real food Nazi, okay, at the time around food rules, right? Like no gluten, no dairy, has to be organic, no sugar, blah. And then I would encourage them to try things and whatever. I would call it adventurous eating. And oh my God, the gaslights abound. Anyway, and then I also decided, you know what? Their rooms are their rooms. They can do whatever the fuck they want in their rooms. It's not my business. It's their room. That's why I gave them a room. I didn't have to give them a room,
Right.
and I did. So here it is. So I have since that. So what is that? You know, it's
Like
almost 6 years ago.
5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I have never said a word about laundry, about mess, about the rooms. I literally don't say a word. Their rooms
Wow.
in my house are always clean. Always. Like I wouldn't even think about it because they always are. My one
And do you think
teenager.
that's because they are intrinsically
Yes,
motivated?
that's my
They
point.
see the own
Yes,
benefit, right, of having a clean room
and the natural consequences
versus,
of not
right.
having them.
Well, because also when you understand just like childhood wounds and all of that, it's like you'll often do the same as what, your parents were telling you, or the
Totally.
complete opposite. So if you were always told have a clean room, then you end up being a mess because that's like this inner rebel.
Pendulum.
We all,
Yeah.
right, we all know that we operate better in a clean space. But if your nervous system has then become so wired that actually like a clean space can almost be like unsafe in a way, right? To an extent,
It's
depending
for
how
you
you've
to
taken in
figure
that
out.
information.
Yeah,
Right,
it's for
right,
them to figure out. And my daughter, every solstice we have like a little, I don't know what, like a little thing we do
yeah,
together. And part of it is like asking of each other something. And my daughter recently, or whatever, it's last year or something, asked me, she's like, Mama, because the last vestige was bedtime, right? Like I go to bed super
mm,
early and I think sleep is just, so important, all the things. And like, I would like get on them still about putting the tech away and start going to bed and it's getting late and you got to get up early.
right,
Oh my God, there are infinite examples I could give you. Like, I don't want my kids to go to school. I literally do not want them to go to school,
yep,
period. I am an unschooling advocate. My kids
yep.
are straight A and A plus students of their own accord. They never miss a fucking day of school. I can't even drag them out of school. Okay. So like
Right, because they came to
polarity
you,
is
right,
real.
Kelly, saying, right, they came to you, right, Kelly, saying, I don't want to be homeschooled anymore.
Right.
I want to go to school. And you had to like put your ego down. So, yeah, so talk to us about then your own transformation with motherhood, but also with like taking yourself out of these, the feminism paradigm, like the radical feminism paradigm. And my audience knows what we're talking about when we say feminism. We're not
Yeah.
talking about having equal rights. We're talking about the stuff beyond that. Like talk to me about your journey with that and what you really had to face to undo a lot of the lessons and the teachings that have been programmed into your body, but also then the softening, because that's been a big part of what you talk about. Of you're very open with sharing that, of like going from this super hyper masculine controlling like blah blah blah, even with your kids, but also with love, to then actually softening. Just share like what did that look like for you, even with your activism days, right? And then
Yeah.
realizing I don't have to be this like screaming pitchfork woman. I like that's not my responsibility. I can do it in a way that's not so exhausting for the body. Ladies, if you are not already on the Her Year waitlist for 2026, like you just don't want to miss out on this. I feel like Her Year 2025 was truly a teaser. And I say that with like kind of a smirk because this program was better than I even planned for it to be. And everybody in this program, everybody's expectations was just wildly exceeded, including myself. Very proud to say the plan that we have for next year will blow your mind. So now that I know what I'm doing next year for this program in 2026, I'm like, Oh, 2025 was like the beginning. It was the teaser. So if you're the kind of woman who's ready to stop talking about her next level and actually fully live it and embody it, her year is where that happens. And of course, if you're not sure it's for you, read the website page. A few really key things is it is a 12-month mastermind like style program where we're really centered around the conversation of what it looks like to fully embody feminine leadership. And it's not just for business owners, it's for women who are leading in any area of life. Maybe you have a career, maybe you don't, but you find that you are leading, whether it's in love, whether it's in the family, whether it's in motherhood, health, your career, and you want to do it in a feminine way. You want to reduce that mental load. You don't want to be burnt out anymore. And you just want to get to the next level of everything in life. And if you look at the 12-month plan, you will see that every month we talk about a different thing. And I give you guys a different masterclass. It is an action-based program. If you do not want to take action, if you do not want to be told what to do, and then all you have to do is do it, then this is not the program for you. Okay. The waitlist is where you will get early access, you will get bonuses, you'll get first dibs when the doors open. You do not want to not be on this waitlist, especially if you've been feeling the pull. Just trust it. Join her year next year, plan to do it, add yourself to the waitlist, and let's make 2026 the year that you actually become her.
Yeah. So I have taken a personal and professional interest in victim consciousness for 15 years. And my initial exploration of it was really in observing the heroine's journey that my patients were experiencing when they came to me, hobbled by multiple prescriptions, desperate to just feel better, however that could happen. And of course, that virtually never, I wouldn't say never, but virtually never happens through the prescription route, just gets more complex. And there's sort of this whack-a-mole phenomenon of new symptoms popping up here and here and here every time you layer another one on.
Right.
So they would come to me in this very compromised, disempowered, and seemingly dependent state, literally and figuratively dependent on these meds. And as I would watch them, so I specialized in deprescribing. And as I would watch them come off these meds and move through the emotional confrontation with the version of themselves that they rejected when they said yes to the medication, I saw this very archetypal, stereotyped journey, meaning like it was the same pretty much every single time, all the phases. And that's why when my patients would experience suicidality, I never would freak out ever, because I knew it was a very significant threshold beyond which was an experience of embodiment, empowerment, and clarity that they wouldn't otherwise access, right? And it was quite fleeting, usually. Fleeting meaning on the order of, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks of their life experience. So as I would watch them mature into, you could call it sovereignty, creator consciousness, adult psychology,
Yeah.
I saw these patterns of how the system offers poor bargains, what I like to refer to as poor bargains, where it seems like a good deal what you're getting, but you're trading something that is intrinsic to your existential fulfillment as a human. Like it's not something, it's like a bit of your soul, right? That you
Right.
need in order to feel whole. So the bargain will ultimately cost you far more than you imagine, you're paying. So then I started to see this same pattern in other arenas, right? And I became super interested in things like, childbirth, right?
Right.
Um, and marriage, and the way that I would say egalitarian marriage, right? Like the sort of 50-50 vibes. And that landed me ultimately in the realm of feminist ideology, and specifically the feminist virtue signaling around careerism, right? So what it is to, serve your boss
Right.
versus your husband, right? And what it is to, be a part of the marketplace and corporatocracy instead of your family. What it is to imagine that you are, as a mother, you possess interchangeable hands, right? So any warm hands can mother,
Right.
your baby just fine, right? And of course, that sets the stage for burogamy, right? And this idea that the state can step in with through daycare and subsidies and play just as fine a role as you would have, as a mother, wife, in this case, also husband. Anyway, and so I started to look at my life. Okay, at this point, I was, out of my second marriage, and my daughters were teenagers already, and I had created the conditions to prioritize anything but mothering. Right. So I
Mm.
had severe, I would say, workaholism in the
Yeah.
early part of my career, to the extent that I would, oh my gosh, I could tell you so many funny stories. My first husband would call these like early blogs. So I've been in the digital space like a really long time, relatively
Yeah.
speaking, and like a decade and a half or whatever. And so I would write, before I would write like long form annotated reference blogs, I would write these things called snippets, right? And I
Yeah.
remember I remember that I was like in the airport with him, and I was like, I gotta write something down. And we're like gonna wait for the plane or whatever. We got like 20 minutes or something, but I just have to open my laptop. Okay. And he's
Mm.
like, oh, is it an urgent snippet? Like, yeah.
Mm.
Urgent, what is that? Nobody should have that
Right.
vernacular in their marriage. Okay.
Right.
So I prioritized my work over my marriage and over my role, not over my kids, literally over my role as mother. Like, it was
Mm.
far more important to me to serve my mission and my purpose than my whatever I imagine my
And did you
fulfillment could
see
have
like that there was more value in working than like doing the laundry, for example, as though working it made you more worthy than if you were at home doing cooking or laundry?
been. 100%, one ten
Right.
thousand percent. And not
Yeah.
only that, but I would experience, which is something I was going to mention earlier when it comes to like chores and stuff, because my daughters don't do any chores, none.
Hmm.
And sometimes they'll clean their plates and sometimes not. And these days, when I vacuum, do laundry, drive them around or whatever, something just shifted for me. And that shift was like, I have 18 years, theoretically, with it makes me want to cry. I could literally cry about this on a dime, with these girls. Like, it's too fucking short. And
I get it now being a
I'm
mom.
not
I'm
gonna
like,
waste like 10
yeah.
minutes. I used to hire a driver, okay? And now I like can't even imagine doing that, because I will pick them up anywhere, anytime, because it's time I get to be with them. They are
Right.
fucking amazing. Being with them is like literally my favorite thing in the world to do.
Yeah.
And if I can create a beautiful household that feels clean and lovely, great. What's the
Yeah.
problem? Do fucking dishes. I can listen to a podcast. It's not that deep. Okay.
Right.
So I kind of like woke up out of the hypnosis of it. But all of this is to say that I used to think of all these like chores and domestic responsibilities as interfering with my productivity. So if I can
Yeah.
write an epic blog, I could start working on my book, I can, put the finishing touches on my program, I can, coach. At that time I had a practice. Why would I vacuum? Like, that is so beneath me. And not only that, it's interfering with my productivity. So the
Right.
idea of like driving, but I could be doing a million things, getting things done. Okay. So like, I just imagine, and my parents were very involved. So I was like, oh, they have people who love them. What's the problem? And in some
Right.
way, I guess it was okay, because they turned out so far amazing. But regardless, this is about me and my experience and what I
Mm.
missed out on. Okay. Because then I prioritized another man for not their father, um, for 8 years, probably over even my work and them. So maybe they came like third, you know?
Right.
And of course,
Right.
none of this was conscious, none of this was intentional. It was
Of
the
course.
nature of my emotional enmeshment in that dynamic. And I woke up out of this a couple of years out of that relationship I stopped drinking alcohol. I still to this day don't even know what the relationship is there, because it's not like I ever had any consequences or anybody was ever like, "Oh, you should really look at this." But there was some way that just so a social relationship to like tequila and mezcal and,
Right.
whatever, was limiting my capacity to be wrong in
Mm,
relation to my kids. And I got real fucking good at it real fast when I started raw dogging reality. When I just was like,
right.
I'm here, I'm showing up. And you know what? My life is like really understimulating and has been for a couple of years, meaning I don't have drama. I don't have conflict. Like, I don't have whatever I was getting out of the intensity of my last relationship for so many years. And so I'm just kind of around, hanging
Right.
around. And the prioritization of my role as mother, it's like just in time, because I have a year and a half with my eldest, most likely. And I'm so grateful to the hand of God, for, gently moving me in this direction to appreciate that my 7-figure business, my New York Times bestseller, my launch this, launch that, my accolades here and there, literally feel like nothing relative to a moment of intimate connection, joy, laughing with my girls on vacation. Relationships matter. I'm a woman, okay?
Yeah.
Achievement is not it. It's not where it's at. And that does not mean that women should not express themselves and build businesses, do whatever the fuck you want. But when you're prioritizing in your value stack your achievements, productivity, and success, which I did for many, many years, as I'm saying, when you're prioritizing that over your relationships, you will get to some sort of pinnacle, some sort of summit. You'll look around and be like, dang,
Yeah.
I missed something. And I took a poor bargain that said that I would feel powerful and secure and free
Right.
if I am entitled and I access the same, you know, capitalistic goals that men have access to. And the truth, in my opinion, is that relational safety and intimacy offers a kind of fulfillment that we'll never find through. And that's why
Right.
the achievements, they feel for many of us women like it's like a lick of ice cream when you're thirsty for water. It's not that it doesn't do anything. It's not that it's not even pleasurable or enjoyable. But I had to get to the place where I work 1 to 2 hours a week, literally. Okay. I am financially independent. I'm secure. I totally unreliant on anybody. I control all the variables in my life. And then look around and be like, you know what would have been awesome in this lifetime? To raise a family with their dad.
Mm.
And I'll never have
And
that
and
until I
so many
die. Like
women,
in this
yeah,
lifetime, that's done for
right.
me.
And so
And that's
many
a grief.
women,
It's a
they're
grief.
in this situation and they're not aware of the fact that they're doing it. And even now, just being a mum, I mean, I talk about this shit so much as well, Kelly, but now just the added layer of being a mother, it like deepens the embodiment of there is literally nothing else that is as important as being with my child. There is something unexplainable, which is why it makes me so sad. The negativity around motherhood these days, that's just seep through social media, where so many women will say, like, how do I know if I want to be a mom? Or I'm afraid of losing X, Y, and Z if I become a mom, as though you're sacrificing everything and you lose your life. And it's like,
I get
I
it.
can tell you, hand on heart that being a mother is easier than running a business. Like the amount of joy
Oh,
that
yeah.
you get on a daily basis, you don't fucking get that from your business. Like you go through months of hardship sometimes being a CEO, even if you're not a CEO or like not running your own business, that's way harder. And when you were saying about like the only the 18 years, that breaks my heart. Like even just seeing my son, like he's 4 months now, and I'm
Right.
like, I can't even remember your newborn face. Like what the heck? And it makes me, and I remind myself of this, of like, once he's like 5, he's not going to want me as much. He's
Mm.
not going to want to, be sleeping with me and on me and want the boob and blah, blah, blah. And he's going to want dad more and all of that. And so it's like, it's this, it's beautiful, but it's sad at the same time. Like when you need to remember, like when you're going through a hard time, like this is so temporary, but also that's heartbreaking of this is so temporary. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about like the feminism piece and your journey of softening, what would you tell women, Kelly, that are still in this programming of the more that I work, the more that I achieve, the better that I am as a woman, and they're really struggling to see the value in softening? And look, this doesn't mean that you need to spend your days doing laundry, because like, as I've shared very openly, we have a cleaner, we have a housekeeper. I don't want to spend my time doing those things because I want to spend that time when I'm not working with my son and doing more enjoyable things. So it doesn't mean that you need to, we're not saying you need to be a trad wife by any means, but what would you say if you don't want to be, right? But what would you say to the woman that is currently deeply stuck in this programming where it feels extremely unsafe to get out of that hypermasculinity and to soften, whether it's in her relationships, her career, all the things?
Mm. First of all, I would say I get it because I often consider myself like, just like a neon lights doer. I mean, I crush a to-do list like nobody's business. I mean, I have lived so many years of my life in adaptive vigilance, meaning that my trauma informed defenses have served me in this value stack that we're referencing and that I am describing as being a masculine value stack, right? And so I understand it, and it has taken me years. I would say 3, uh, if I were to like specifically reference, to titrate, which is like actually a scientific term that's often used in the somatic experiencing world, to titrate into boredom, stillness, softness, slowness. I mean, there will be days in my life right now where I have a totally unscheduled day, like literally nothing on the schedule. And I will have this like paralytic, nihilistic wave
Mm,
of like, what is the point? I don't know how else to describe it. It's
yeah.
very, and then I will spend, I'm a big believer, like I'm a New Yorker, okay? So like I'm a pragmatist. I'm a big believer in like, you know, just small bite size practical things you have like in your pocket. Okay.
Yeah.
So I will take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, maybe 90, and I will just, I call it entering through the upset. I will just be with whatever the fuck that is,
Yeah.
that actually thought I wanted peace, harmony, stability, ease, spaciousness. And here I am. And it's like a silent scream at times.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that's why I would absolutely encourage uh, a slow titration. What do I mean by that? I mean, pick like one activity that you do in a day, putting lotion on your body, brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, driving in the car, and create more spaciousness or slowness for a small part of that activity, like 2 to 3 minutes of that activity. And as you build in these pockets, you could graduate to spending 10 minutes just sitting on your couch. My Gen Z, my daughter's generation, calls it raw dogging boredom. Okay. It's like a
Okay,
rebrand.
that's what the raw dogging is. I see that of like people like raw dogging a flight. I'm like, what the?
Isn't
Initially,
it
I thought it
so
was
funny?
something very different to what it actually
I
is.
mean, right. It's like
Right.
sounds like
Yeah,
it.
it
No,
sounds like
there's
you're going on like with like, I don't know, no pants or something or other is what
I
it
know.
kind of sounds like.
No, I'm obsessed with their like creativity. It's just the best. Anyway, it's like a rebrand of meditation basically without the
Right.
intention, right? So like to sit on your couch and do absolutely nothing. No podcast, no book. My first exposure to this was in 2022 when I did a 9-day water fast, water only fast.
Mm,
And I sat in my house by myself and sipped water for 9 days. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Okay. Because I met the part of me that doesn't want to be here. Okay, that same part of me drives my consumption addictions, meaning like the endless podcast books. Now I'm like an audiobook girl. Oh my gosh. If fiction too, if there is an
right.
addiction worse than this, I'm not sure. I would like to see it because it like I when I'm washing dishes, when I'm doing laundry, when I'm walking around, when I'm getting dressed, why not have a book in my ears, right? And that book takes me into another world where I'm so not fucking here that I'm
Right.
dissociated.
Well, it's also just that overconsumption, thinking that
Yes.
it's that fear of like not being productive, right? The amount of times I'll tell even clients or like someone doing a program, I'm like, go on a walk and don't listen to my podcast.
Yes,
Don't re-listen to today's call. Just go on the walk, don't have anything in your ears and just look around. And that is so hard for
that
people.
took
Or
me
even like, yeah,
years though. Literally
but
that specific practice took me I had to like baby
mm,
step into it with minutes. Like I would literally set a timer and just sit on my couch and like look at the light
yeah.
filtering through the blinds
Because
or
you can
whatever.
feel your body though, right? And so like now, so when I do that all the time after work, I'll like, now take my kid and we go on a walk and like just right now thinking about it, it gives me like those like tingle good feelings
Oh,
because
I
it
love
just
that.
is like I can't describe it, right? But it feels like an opening, a relaxing, like spaciousness in my body. But that takes time to get to, right? In the initial phase, you may actually be hearing yourself and hearing the negative things that you're saying to yourself, or the rushing thoughts, or just frankly, feeling the discomfort of not having something else that is basically like helping you disassociate and numb out from your body. And like how many women are living their lives 24/7 in a state of disassociation, right? They're like, my sex life isn't good. I'm like, go on a walk without a podcast. Like, truly, that, like, it sounds so random, but like going on a walk without anything in your ears or washing dishes, like you said, without anything in your ears, that is going to help you in your sex life. Or even I'll tell this to clients. I'm like, I'm a tea whore. I love drinking tea. And I'm like, who here, and no one can until they actually then practice it. I'm like, make a cup of tea and go sit outside without your phone and just do nothing. Just stare. Just enjoy the cup of tea. And like that is so hard. So hard. Like many women haven't even thought about doing that, let alone giving themselves permission to like waste, quote unquote, 10 minutes of their day or 15 minutes of their day doing that. Even just the sheer act of when you boil the kettle, stand there and wait for the kettle to boil instead of going and doing 50 other things in those 2 minutes, because you actually could have a moment of relaxation in those 2 minutes in your day. And like I even know from breastfeeding now, I'm like, it's the best because throughout my workday, I'm having all these moments of like kind of meditation, if you will, because I do not breastfeed and have my phone with me. I'm not watching TV or doing anything else at the same time. I don't even read a book. I'm just sitting there staring at him.
Amazing.
And it's like when you are continuously doing that, I mean, Kelly, in your experience, like what has that brought you? Having more of the, not even just stillness, but taking out so much stimulation from your life. What has that brought you?
Mhm.
Some of you might have been seeing that I am posting on Instagram the herbs that I have been taking for postpartum, but I was also taking them to help with fertility before we conceived. And we did conceive on the first try. And I've been taking them a while for my adrenals, for my gut. I am such a fan of herbalism. You guys know that about me, like TCM, herbalism, it's like so up my alley. Anyway, one of my friends, Paul, he has an incredible business called PK's. And the herbalist, he's a herbalist for it, makes these incredible herb blends, tinctures is what you would call it actually, tinctures for all sorts of different things. Whether you're struggling with adrenal fatigue, then you're going to want to get the Wake Me Dead, is what it's called. His names are really quirky because like he's really quirky and a really funny guy. So it fits. Blood bank is also really good, especially if you've just given birth. You can have it on hand. So before you even give birth, I had blood bank on hand. Blood bank's also really good if you have a light period or a really heavy period, or have gone through any kind of like accident where you've lost a lot of blood or surgery. Blood banks also, they're really good for energy. There's a ton. You also can get ones for fertility for women and then also ones for men. And there's also the lactation one that I'm currently using right now called Yummy Mummy. So my code is Monica20 and that will get you 20% off. I don't think they ship outside. They do not ship outside the US. So for anybody in the US, I would highly, highly, highly recommend getting PKs for any herbs and use the code Monica20. And if you're coming to one of my events in the US, then whilst you're here, order a bunch and then you could take them back to wherever you live.
Well, an important bit of context is because of how wired and reinforced, right? Because I am a poster girl for the feminist agenda because of the things that I went to MIT. Okay, like
Right.
I did the things that men do, bleeding, but I wasn't even because I was continuous cycling my birth control. So
Yeah.
I was so deeply wired, and I would go so far as to say addicted to externalized focus, vigilance, and also drama, right? So conflict, that spike of a problem to solve. That for me, I developed an awareness around the role of safety. Okay, so I already knew the role that safety plays in healing from medical issues, right? Because I developed this program, Vital Mind Reset, and I saw these extraordinary successes at it, and I said, all that it's doing is sending safety to these bodies, right? Like that's all that's
Mm.
happening. That's why people are healing. Okay, so I already saw it in that context, but I didn't really know how to access it relationally. And relationally is everything: your relationship to money, to the objects, to people, to work, to
Food, all the
reality,
things.
everything, food, exactly. So that's when I started to come on the responsibility that I have to generate safety for myself. And I call it, kind of tongue in cheek, I call it self husbanding. And
Mm.
it's sort of like, this inner polarity that I visualize, I would say, in moments where I want to access what you're describing as that exhale, right? That experience of receptivity to what is right there in the moment, the sensory and sensual nature of being in a human body in this place. Okay. And so self-husbanding, when I refer to it, I really just mean this invocation of a yang energy. I'm very familiar with that. Okay. Most of us are. We've been talking about it this whole conversation. So
Right.
what does that look like? Well, it looks like the energy of a devoted husband, right? Let's say. So you feel your spine grow like tall, strong, long. You feel your gaze kind of like cast a bit downward, and you are present. You're attentive. You're cool, calm, collected. You're like, bring it to me, baby. I got you. Right. So this energy, we offer this all the time. In some circles, it's called containment. We offer it to each other as women. We certainly offer
Right.
it to our children. Okay. So it's not necessarily like a manly energy, but I just sort of jokingly call it self
Yeah.
husbanding because I can invoke that really easily. This archetype of the present, big, still man. Okay. And I do that inside of myself. And it's just literally takes like 10 seconds to visualize it. And there's a sort of like postural thing, that you become a little bit more almost like predatory instead of prey. And
Yeah.
in doing so, you contain, observe, and witness whatever's flowing around inside in a way that creates this natural barrier. Now, I've studied these polarity dynamics, like, I mean, literally, not like the sort of like man woman relationship optimization polarity scene. I've studied these because I've been so many different poles. Okay. Like I've been this and then I've been that. Like I just hop from one pole to the other. And so I've been very interested in these dynamics. And I've seen the same phenomena in my business where, and I know you get this, we've talked about this, where it wasn't until I was in a place where I could trust, open, receive, get out of my own way, stop micromanaging in my business, that I attracted the kind of husbanding infrastructure, let's say in my operations, my COO, that allows me so much spaciousness that all my
Mm.
whole job is just what's exciting for me, right? Like meaning
Right.
like coming up with what's inspirational for me and new ideas. And I wasn't available for that on a nervous system level. For me, the path took 15 years. Yikes. Okay. For anyone listening, I hope it's like 6 to 9 months where you become aware of how you're bringing those habits
Yeah.
of micromanagement, externalized focus, and the vigilance of control into every dynamic that otherwise could feed you if you become this match because you are self-containing, because you are no longer trying to blame, finger point, condemn, or really even fix it from the outside. And as a righteous bitch, pitchfork activist, this was a major identity shift for me because I had built an entire career vocation on pointing the finger at who had done us wrong. In this case, it was pharma, right?
Right.
Um, and of course, I brought that into my relationships where I imagined like all that I needed to ever do was to get, this is where my shadow lives, to get someone to see my perspective.
Mm.
And because I love to yap and I have some wordsmithing skills or whatever, I would be able to convince myself that I had sort of won interactions by making my points. And I can keep like a Rolodex of points in my mental reserves.
Mm.
And that is not relational. Okay. That is a form of non consensual dominance that has characterized every experience of abuse we've ever known as humans. Right. So,
Oh, I did a whole episode, Kelly, on unsolicited advice and basically how
right,
it's like all about you, actually, like in a bad way. Like it's a full reflection
100%.
of you and what you said, right? You think that you're telling yourself that you're helping somebody else. I
I
loved
know.
I didn't love, but I loved the amount of people that were trying to give me unsolicited advice about my birth and like the choices I
I
was making. Even
know.
when I'd like one time posted that I was going to my midwife appointment and then people thinking that like it's appropriate to tell me a midwife is dangerous, I need an OB. I'm like, that actually just shows how close-minded you are. Anyway, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but it was really interesting because so many people, they do this. They give the unsolicited advice thinking they're telling themselves that they are helping the other person when really what you're doing is you're conditionally loving. What you're really doing is judging. What you're really doing is making
Projecting.
yourself feel better about yourself because you actually don't fully believe what you're saying, right? If you
100.
were so deep in your truth that, for example, a midwife is dangerous and an OB is the only way to go, then you wouldn't need to fucking say anything to me.
100%. Yeah.
Right? That's why
I
that's why
yeah.
all the people that are commenting on people's Instagrams and like trolling them and saying all this nasty shit. I'm like, wow, this is literally just I love it, especially when people do that when I'll post something about like feminism or like, how like it's, pitching women against each other and then women just like blow up my comments. I'm like, yep, you're literally proving my point. So thank you
Exactly.
very much.
Looking for exhibit A. I know. I mean, I went through a real social media spiritual upgrade
Yeah, I wanted to
a couple
talk
of
on
years
that.
ago.
In 2020, you were like burned at the stake because you were speaking some truth. Can you share, Kelly, like that? I mean, being canceled and to the, just that experience that you had, I can only imagine how challenging it was. Can you
Oh,
share how did you get out of that? How have you reclaimed your voice, your truth, yourself, your safety from something like that?
well, it's funny because I wasn't even talking about that era.
Oh,
So that in that time, I had already been, like my first book was like blacklisted, like my
got
Wikipedia,
it.
don't Google me, kind of a thing. You know, I'd already been very familiar with that kind of like cancel culture,
Okay.
and so when I made the disinformation dozen list or whatever, and whenever that was, 2020, 2021, I liked it. Honestly, it's not
Mm,
difficult for 1 second, not even a little bit, because the part of me that enjoyed the conflict, the part of me that is a provocateur, the part of me that loves attention, any attention, and is very used to that kind of attention,
mhm.
like I've always been that one. I'm always in trouble, or whatever.
Okay.
And that was not difficult even a little bit. However, what I was referring to was probably a year or so later, when I went through this, I don't know, this portal of embodiment and sexual reclamation and a kind of erotic, and I've been celibate for years, so I don't mean that in the conventional sense, but an erotic opening that took me onto the pole. Okay, that took me
Mm,
into an obsession with dance and women's forms and moving and choreographing and dressing up and all these things. I grew my nails long. I'd only ever had, like boy short nails, and um, totally changed my wardrobe, so whatever this like sort of sensual awakening that I went through, I decided to, not super consciously, but I decided to share this on my then Instagram. And I started writing about things like the Madonna horror complex and uh, our relationship to sexuality as women. And wow. I mean, I lost 100,000 newsletter subscribers over that year.
wow.
Yeah, literally. It was like almost half my subscribership and my, whole Instagram experience became a spiritual practice actually, because the kinds of the feedback that I got, unsolicited feedback, was ranging from just run-of-the-mill character assassination, like you're a narcissist, no wonder your marriages, don't work or whatever, to you're a bad dancer, please stop, like, to why don't you focus on what you're good at, to you're endangering, the women that you're purporting to serve, and all sorts of, and then there was also tons of celebratory energy. Okay. Like if I could tell you how many women I have inspired to pole dance, like if I got, $1 from each of them, I
Yeah.
would retire. Okay.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, because I'm like not that good, but I'm also like, I don't know, I make it accessible. Okay.
Right. The accessibility and like the permission. Yeah.
Permission. Okay, so I actually developed what I call, out of that, wearing the villain crown. So I developed this personal practice where I would, the ones that got me, that zinged, I would sit with them, right? And just see, if it's even a little bit true, what they're saying. And the neutralization, the alchemy really, that happens again within seconds of allowing it to be true, instead of doing the thing I'm really good at doing, which is like the snapback, okay? Was really powerful for me. But that was extraordinarily humbling, and I wrote a book out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
Love
like,
it.
yeah, you turn it, you spin it into your
Yes.
own personal growth and expansion. But it's interesting to me that because there's not a part of me that I can access that thinks that I'm like frankly stupid, let's say. If somebody says you're so stupid, you don't know science, like I don't, that's like, that does nothing inside my system at all.
Yeah.
But if somebody says like some version of your womaning wrong, it hits, because of course there's a part of me that is really confused about my
Right.
role as woman, how to be a woman. We've discussed it, for this
Yep.
conversation. So I came to the conclusion, which it sounds like you came to as well, which is that, gosh, if women would surrender this one habit, and that habit is imagining that they know better how another woman should woman. Just this one thing. If this one thing would change today, where a woman would never again tell another woman, unsolicited, of course, is implied,
Right.
tell another woman how to woman, dress, behave, have sex, love, parent, birth, do this. If that would cease, the consciousness of this realm would change overnight.
I know.
So what
It's
does
so
that tell you about how persecuted we are by men? Like if
Well,
we could change this.
it's so interesting, especially with social media, Kelly, just like how people just, and everyone has the right to voice their opinions and whatnot, but it's just like people, and I talked about it in my book too, of like, I think that women just want to keep fight, like the hardcore feminists, they just want to fight for the sake of fighting. They just get off what we've talked about today. They just get off on the adrenaline rush, right? And I kind of call it like the queen bee syndrome. Like we all want to be the queen bee, right? And so then we pitch ourselves towards other women, we rip others down, but we all simultaneously have a sisterhood wound, a huge sisterhood wound, right? We all deeply crave a village, to be in community, to feel safe around other women, to have those sorts of relationships. But then at the same time, if you're posting these nasty things or commenting nasty things, it's like you're not actually healing yourself either. You're continuing to proliferate the very wound that you also want to heal at the same time.
Totally.
I want to ask you a last question, Kelly, before we wrap up. So you talked about your experience with helping your patients get off medicine and then like their whole journey with that and all of that kind of stuff. Do you think, and there's probably nuance to this, do you think that these days there are some mental health diagnoses that are actually just symptoms of a culture that punishes softness, slowing down, like people being different, that kind of stuff? And do you think there is an overdiagnosis? And like, how have you seen that negatively affect people being their authentic selves?
Yes, I love this question. I years ago I was on Joe Rogan, and so there's like a 3-hour breakdown of
If anyone wants to go, then
science. Yeah, if anybody's like really into this subject, that tends to be a really good reference and resource. However, suffice it to say, since I get to talk to you about this feminism dupe, we don't have to look much farther than the fact that 1 in 4 women are on a psychotropic, right? 1 in 4 women are on an antidepressant. That's how I became a reproductive psychiatrist. I was one of the first 300 to specialize in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women. That's what I did, okay? Before I had my awakening, if we want to call it that. And I did so because of a burgeoning need for decision making around exposure to these medications antenatally and postpartum. Okay, so if 1 in 4 women are in a position, because nobody wants to take a fucking medication, okay? If 1 in 4 women are like engaging that Sophie's choice, right, or that poor bargain, they're imagining that it's probably better that they take the edge off, that they do something about it.
Well, it's
Maybe it's
also easier.
temporary.
Let's be frank. It's easier in the sense that you don't have to face your shit, to keep it simply.
And it's socially sanctioned, right? Because we
Mm,
have been trained by the allopathic industry to
right.
imagine that our role in our own experience as humans that have bodies, okay, um, express moods and behavior, okay, that our role is to ask someone outside of us what's going on inside, and then to do, it's called being compliant, as we're told. Okay. So when you're a good patient, what does that mean? You show up to your appointments, you take your
Mm,
meds, okay, and
I'm a
you
terrible patient.
you're obedient.
Yeah,
And
no,
doesn't that
I've been in hospital a lot of times for like accidents and whatever, and I'm like, I am that patient that they all just want to like poke their eyeballs out with.
yes. Oh, I would have hated you when I was on the floors. Yeah. And we're indoctrinated around that in school, right? So it starts in
Right.
the school system where we become cogs in the wheel and good, compliant, obedient, subjects. And the experience that we have of our bodies, I mean, it sounds so benign, but like when you have to ask as a kindergartner to go pee or to eat,
Mm,
and it's not the time, and so you have to suppress or manipulate a biological impulse, the seeds are sown for this triangulation against yourself, where you experience yourself as other than your body and whatever your body's doing, right? Your body's doing something you don't like, you go, you join forces with the doctor, and then you fight really the body. Okay. And this is, so it's really, it's just dynamics. I certainly no longer believe in the good bad virtue of, I think it's such a trap, especially for activists. It can be an extraordinary trap to imagine that you are superior because you're on the side of good. That's problematic.
right.
It's immature victim
Yeah.
consciousness. So the the experience that I had of witnessing how many women okay, and these are like Cornell educated architects and whatever, right? These are not like necessarily the patients that I saw when I worked on the 13 locked units in Bellevue in New York City.
Right.
So and these women would come in multiply medicated, like 3 to 5 meds that they've been on, sometimes 10 years, 15, 30 years, okay?
Wow.
And to me, that is an indication that we are not doing well as women. Something's up, okay? And it could be that our sources of fulfillment are somehow compromised. Okay, we've been talking about that and the
And our
nature.
nervous systems are compromised because we're trying to be like men.
Exactly. And we don't feel safe, right? We may feel
Right.
some degree of freedom, but is that really a primary value for us? Or is safety actually a higher on the Maslow's hierarchy? So it became really clear to me in my practice that the women that were medicated in these ways had special sensitivities, right? So it's like that Krishnamurti quote, it's no sign of health to be well adapted to a profoundly sick society, that was a right sensitivity to wrong living that these women were experiencing. And of course, I did a lot of work on the gut brain axis. And so if you know the phrase dysbiosis, right, it means wrong living. Dysbiosis, which is like gut dysfunction, right? If you have
Right.
IBS or whatever. And so, how are we wrong living? Well, that's where I developed a passion for lifestyle medicine, right? So, the basics of correcting these chopping wood, carrying water decisions you make every day to start to send safer signals to the body. And what I found was that women, as they got off their meds, they walked away from their diagnoses, they almost to a person made contact with some kind of creative expression. They started writing, they started singing, they started painting, they started an Etsy business or whatever. And I was blown away to see what a certain kind of safety allowed for, right? The riverbanks, those yang masculine riverbanks, allowing for the water of their soul to begin to mobilize, usually again, because there was a point at which it was arrested. So, I came to the conclusion that, and this is not just my, I have hundreds of references in my books, that the entire system of diagnoses is an impressionistic, subjective house of cards, and that there's no such thing as a valid disease entity. I would actually say that generally, period. Now, it's all pattern recognition. But let's just talk about psychiatry. And so what does that mean? That means that we're allowing industry-influenced men, because I'm sure there's some women who've infiltrated at this point. But regardless, it's a biased, subsection of the population to sit around a table and make decisions about what goes into the DSM and what doesn't. And it's an ever ballooning, hundreds of pages book that states what's normal and not. And you don't have to be like a Foucault expert to see the biopolitical potential of psychiatry to set the standards for what's permissible and what's punishable when it comes to human behavior. And so on that spectrum from the artists are here to save mankind and we're locking them up in the loony bin and throwing them on, nervous system paralytic medications, all the way to what is the role of society and the technocracy and wherever the hell we might be headed.
Right.
There's a lot of questions to ask. But for me, the long and short of it was okay, if 1 in 4 women are on meds and we're supposed to have triumph through feminist progress, what is that disconnect? What's actually happening here? And why do so many of us feel gaslit? Because we know we should be appreciative, we should be happy, we should be enjoying our lives, but we feel hollow, we feel disappointed, we feel frustrated, we feel resentful, and we feel overwhelmed and often numb. So what's going on? And that's in the walking wounded layer, right? Because the women who express in bolder colors and get called bipolar and psychotic and borderline and, labeled with anxiety and depression, is something broken about them? Well, they probably believe that. So it's not going to be tough to convince them. Okay. However, it could possibly be the case that they are rightly responding to something that is awry emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually in their life. And how do they answer that question that their symptoms are posing,
Oh my God, Kelly, we could just go on and on and on because I'm we're not going to touch on this right now. We're going to close it up for everybody to digest. We'll have to have you back on because I'm so then interested in your take on even with technology and how that then interrupts children, right? Because that's a whole big thing. The way that we were, that the way that we were raised, and even just with the, being intrinsically motivated, it's okay, well, where do phones come in? Where then it's okay, but now children are becoming dopamine addicted, where it's how is that going to then change if they are intrinsically motivated? We could go on forever. Is there any last things that you want to share with the audience before we wrap up, and also share where they can find you?
First of all, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. It's just really feels like, hanging out with a girlfriend, having a matcha.
Yes.
It's really, really wonderful. And I'd be happy to come back, of course. So I guess I would just share that I have very recently packaged as a system that I call the Relaxed Woman System, my 2 signature programs, one for health reclamation, one for relational reclamation. And I call it the Relaxed Woman System because I've decided that is the holy grail for me as a woman, and for me as a representative of women, that we could exhale, that we could experience the relaxation that is our nervous system birthright and see what flows, right? See what is the gift we came here to offer, see what creativity looks like moving through our body. So I feel really lit up. That was 15 years in the making. So it feels like a culmination. And sometimes that's why I'm I guess I'm ready to retire now. I'm done.
Yeah.
I made the
Because
thing.
you've worked 15 years. Yeah, exactly. On this thing. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for being here. You just are a wealth of knowledge. I know that everybody is going to leave this episode with a lot to reflect on with themselves. I would recommend to even re-listen to this episode because you'll hear things differently a second time. Please make sure that you follow Kelly on Instagram, jump onto her newsletter, check out her programs, and we will see you guys all next week for the next episode.